others, the deep engagement of multiple perspectives and modes of inquiry, the lack of deference to ideas because of authority or popular recognition, or popularity, recognition of, and now here I add, the importance of, no, he added, I'm stressing, the importance of culture, history, and context, and the seriousness of intellectual purpose, unquote. That's almost exactly what this course is doing. This is not just rhetoric, but it's not just this course. These illustrate dramatic changes at the USC. It is not just the coronavirus, but the arts, which have been transforming the ways that many people at the USC have been working, and which this course in turn extends, featuring urban innovation via the arts in specific contexts. The background is in the last decade, the USC has moved from minimal engagement to starting a huge new range of art-sensitive activities, exploring linkages with the social sciences, humanities, computer science, digitalization, aesthetics, literature, and design as one wing. Another wing is what happens in the street, both globally and specific streets nearby the university, as these join directly with our scenes ideas. I'll add that I've been a resident of Bronzeville as long as I've been involved with the university. So for decades, I've been participating in civic activities here and seeing the big contrast with what people say in Hyde Park and what people say in Bronzeville. And we're in the middle of it right now with projects as I'll introduce as we proceed. But it's an opportunity to link traditional world cultures as taught at the university with the African-American heritage of the surrounding areas, including Bronzeville, Woodlawn, South Shore, and Englewood, which are national leaders of African-American culture in the 20th and 21st centuries, starting with figures like Louis Armstrong, jazz, blues, gospel, and later hip hop, rap, and house, including gangster rap today, which continues on. Teenage gang members nearby make videos they post on YouTube, and many are nationally successful singers, musicians, artists, and dancers who've come from this area. There are Hollywood stars that come back to the area and talk in high schools to encourage students like Jennifer Hudson, star of the film Dreamgirls, where she went to high school across the street from where I live, Dunbar High School. Many university faculty and students try to help in a different way disadvantaged students, but they're not sure what to do specifically. The most common extracurricular activity of American undergraduates and USC students is to tutor students and help with their homework. But in doing this, the question arises of what to say, how to encourage or discourage different lines of reasoning, different interpretations of a history book or a musical performance. These issues link directly to this course via cultural scenes, placemaking, ethnicity, neighborhood solidarity, plus the complex issue of culture, as that term is broadly used, and we will use continually in different ways as we elaborate in the course. The Economist started this kind of work decades ago in Gary Becker's own PhD on human capital and Bob Fogel's book, Time on the Cross, both Nobel Prize winners. George Tully's serious modeling data on smoke and cold January temperatures as negative environmental experiences that the census reported for every US county permitted quantitative analysis and modeling of this kind of thing. And that then linked with the more abstract theories. They started working seriously on what then got to be called non-market goods and services, which is the definition of amenities. Amenities, if you then write a new quick equation, I'll just mention very briefly, that utility equals amenities plus total income. People then ask, like Ed Glazer, former student now at Harvard, how important are amenities in driving what cities do? And he argues in an important paper, they're more important than income. So, we've framed this in a number of ways. Actually, I'll even try and see how maybe it's too hard. That is, we can do a poll of the students, but for now, I won't try to do that. But we'll raise that as an option for the future. I'll stick on for the moment by just mentioning, as well, among other names here, Neil Harris in history studied museums, architecture, and more, as did his student David Brooks, now at the New York Times. Susan Sontag, earlier in English, coined the term camp, which is a powerful aesthetic concept which links with cultural and social meanings, joining the social, the psychological, the analytical with the humanities and social sciences. These various examples, ranging from literary and aesthetic concerns, joined to the social, the cultural, the ethnic, religious, fit neatly with our discussions of amenities in the 15 scenes dimensions in our book, Scenescapes. This complex array of interconnected themes inform the activities on the USC campus and nearby neighborhoods, and specifically the Logan Center, new large building, which most of you are familiar with, doing plays. It's for students to do plays. They write, they do stand-up comedy, that musical performances, rehearsals, poetry readings, videos, etc. Next door to it, the Gray Center brings practicing artists from around the world to the USC campus for several months, 6 months, few months, whatever, where they work usually with one faculty member as a collaborator mentor. They may put on a picture exhibit, a lecture, a video, and the like. And these have led to many creative things at a high level of one faculty member and one high-level artist. So joining the tradition of excellence with the engagement of lots of students. The arts came from the students. That is, this serious concern with the arts is very new here at the USC, and it's very new by political leaders and city decision makers. So I came to it not from the USC, but from working with mayors around the country and around the world. The mayors are doing this faster and before, maybe 10 years before many social scientists. So I'm mentioning some exceptions of social scientists, historians, economists who've been doing this earlier, but the importance of this nationally and internationally is only being now gradually appreciated, and the fact that you're in this course shows that you are ahead of the crowd. The crowd is there, but to do this with the seriousness that we hope for and try to achieve at the USC is something that is just really getting going. But I'm sketching some foundations we can build on. The Scenes Project tries to integrate aesthetics, design, and culture with a social science analysis of scenes, neighborhoods, core urban dynamics. And I will just mention in one sentence here that if this is the USC part, immediately nearby is Theaster Gates, professor of visual arts here. And I won't say more about him except to say that he has recently been named at the Venice Biennale the most important creative artist, this is in 2015, in the whole world. Why? Because of his creative working in low-income neighborhoods near the university where he does sculpture. He sings with his group called the Black Monks of Mississippi. He counsels high school students on the arts. He restores buildings with unusual design ideas like recycled mirrors, wooden fences from farmhouses and other locations. And part of his charisma comes from a striking combination of designs and aesthetic traditions seldom or never previously joined, like the Bible, getting to Noah's Ark that's waiting for him in Lake Mission, but he doesn't know if he can get there because there may be, he might get shot on the way, and so forth. He has a dozen or so YouTube performances. Take a look at some of them. We're updating as these continually change, and we work with him and some of his staff for several years now. Okay. One conference we had, several people asked, including the Commissioner of Culture, City of Chicago, a leading foundation that had given him several $1 million, and the dean at the university said, how can we bring this up to scale? Up to scale is a vague label, but it somehow says, we don't want to do this in one small neighborhood on Dorchester Avenue. We want to, you know, how can the world benefit from this kind of activity? And Theaster then we worked on Theaster with that question with four master's students, and he did an answer called the 9 Principles of Equitable Redevelopment, which is on the syllabus. You can see the quick overview, and he's done a couple of videos of this, but they've been taken down, so we can't show you those videos. But we're putting together various alternatives, and these will fold into what we do on Wednesday or in the next days ahead. I'm mentioning some of the background that we can build on, but I don't want to. Let me see here. Let me mention one more thing. What are some examples of cultural placemaking? And I'll just give you 2 extremes. Starchitecture, fancy word, starchitecture, and versus DIY, do-it-yourself placemaking. Do-it-yourself placemaking is Theaster Gates. He had no money. He was a poor potter. He borrowed money from his sister and his mother in his own savings to buy one foreclosed house about maybe 15 years ago. Nobody had heard of him at that point. He fixed it up with his own hands. He had no capital, no big name, no starchitecture. Bottom up, to be sure. The other extreme is starchitecture, and both of these we will explore in the course as 2 extremes and all kinds of things in between. But I'm introducing starchitecture even at the beginning because we don't want to make this only the south side of Chicago. We also want to include Beijing, Paris, and other locations which have been classic leaders of starchitecture. So Alan, if you could maybe show us a little bit of this. I think we're starting maybe with the pyramid. Was that the idea, the pyramids and then Versailles? There we go. So this goes back pretty far. You all know the Egyptian pyramids. But let's push on maybe to what you got next. All right, the Roman Colosseum, most of you have heard about, know about this. The classic story is the Roman leaders would feed the Christian slaves to the lions, and the people would laugh and enjoy the lions chasing after the Christian slaves before Christianity became a major power in its own right. So the Colosseum clearly was a powerful placemaking and culturally defining activity, which said, we, the Romans, dominate the world as they know it. And this was the center of bringing things back. They brought back slaves from Jerusalem. They brought back slaves from Greece, etc. And this was the center of the Roman Empire. Major placemaking activities and institutions. There were many others that I added in our course last quarter on global local politics, Genghis Khan, but we'll skip him for this round, and we'll go to Versailles in terms of the more Western tradition. So Louis XIV clearly the major builder of Versailles, and show us. And this is the, we're getting to the hall, the Galerie des Glaces. This is the Hall of Mirrors, the most famous central scene within the Versailles Palace. And these are the multiple buildings. 10,000 people lived here when this was all constructed, and they included people from like Catherine the Great, the Tsar of Russia, dukes from Italy, leaders from around the world. They would go back to Germany and to Russia, and they were so impressed that they would speak French in Moscow. They would speak French in Prussia. They would speak French in little courts. The court was a critically important scene surrounding the emperor, the duke, the king, and the joining, the building of a scene which mingled personal attention that is one of the celebrations and celebrated and iconized activities was the dressing of the king, of the dressing of operas here shown as well, but others could come and observe and participate in partially the dressing of Louis XIV, and then would try to maybe slip in a personal request for something else. Here's the gate, at least people talk about this is the gate where then in 1789 people said, "We have no bread." The guillotine followed that. So clearly Versailles was a world, or let's say Western European centered world, which brought people here in a culture with a cultural mixed with politics from the beginning. If we flash forward, we have some contemporary French examples of Starchitecture in Paris today. This is the National Library. Compare that to Regenstein. These are shots. The four towers in the middle are the stacks. Students and faculty can work below the ground. The books are celebrated and put up in the towers. Remember that when we see more of Theaster Gates, as he's done something like this. So here we are below the ground where students are working and trying to find books and the like. Let's push on and skip. Okay, now this is the second major contemporary dramatic statement in Paris scenescaping Starchitecture, built maybe 10 or 15 years ago. It's the Centre Georges Pompidou, also called Beaubourg. And look at it, not only it's the building, look at the people outside. That's what makes the scene. The meaning given to this within and without, and the surrounding neighborhood have made this the most attractive cultural activity in Paris today. It attracts twice as many visitors as the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre combined. And it builds on two major books by Laurent Fleury, and we'll go over some of his stuff as we proceed, which he's tried to identify what made this so successful and why is it so different from what we had. Here's the Louvre. Now we're adding not only the Louvre, but I Am Pai, Chinese, who added, and so I'll stop for a second. Can we hold up the show of the slides for a second, or yeah, we can continue. We can look at the tower, the glass tower right next to I Am Pai. I'll hesitate till we. Let me briefly say, the tower, this little pyramid fits in with the Louvre. whereas many Starchitecture items do not. They deliberately contrast. So the Centre Beaubourg I showed you had a contrast, a deliberate contrast, which says, look at me, I hate, I'm fighting the rest of Paris. I Am Pi tried to join the classic Egyptian pyramid, but made it into glass and made it a linkage underground, which joins with all other things in the Louvre in ways that has finally become celebrated as an enhancement and an effort to update. So a general point from that is that Pi was culturally sensitive enough when he then went on and he did, this is inside underneath the glass. These are what you get a ticket here. You then go into the Louvre walking around. So you can walk down and start there, but look up through the glass. As you climb the stairs, you see the dramatic traditional buildings, and it enhances really the traditional buildings all the more by seeing them through this sort of glass. Plus, they have all sorts of movies, lectures, and other activities which join with them. So I'm making a point that you can either shock and try to say, I am replacing everything else, or you can try to say, how can I join and link together multiple distinct aesthetics and look at the contrast that one can potentially build through this joining of the two. And I Am Pi is a critical, different example than most of the Starchitecture which is out there. Okay. Are we shifting now to Beijing?
Yes.
Alan, why don't you comment on these, as you know these better than I?
Well, I actually didn't go to this place to marvel at this building, but this is pretty controversial in China. But from the eyes of, for example, an American or European, this is a stunning architectural feat. It's about 57 or 51 stories, and it has this, in China, people ridicule it like a pants, you know, big giant pants standing on the third ring road in the east part of Beijing. And it's called, it used to be called CCTV, and CCTV is China Central Television. And this is the headquarter building, completed in the year 2012, but it started out in 2004. There was a, it was also also being built during the Beijing Olympics, and yeah, it's probably one of the three top, buildings in Beijing at this moment. So another stunning architectural feat being built is the Beijing mega airport, which costs around $12 billion. And it's huge because Beijing is a city with a lot of people. It's very crowded, and this Beijing capital mega airport is like several, like a fifth ring road south of Beijing, which used to be a close to a rural area in Beijing. I went there for a speech contest back in 2008. It was so far away from the center of Beijing, far outside the Fifth Ring Road. But now it's becoming a huge airport, and this whole exterior looks like, some people say, a phoenix. I don't know how to describe it as a phoenix, but it seems like a huge, aesthetically appealing as well as very functional airport being built in Beijing. And now I think it's operating today, and it's said to be one of the largest airports in the world. So another building. Oh, So these are the two buildings. Other architecture like bird nest, water cube, I guess you know from some pictures. But this one is something I'm highlighting because it's partly functional and because of Beijing population and all the tourists coming in. But at the same time, it has this aesthetic appeal that transcends the day-to-day run-of-the-mill building. So that's two things that you can take a look at for how architecture become part of the Beijing or the national government's strategy to make the city more like a more magnetic. Yeah. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Do we have one more or another picture or two, or is
That's all about China for the moment. We will shift to Chicago, but there are some other, I mean, the beginning of the video shows the infrastructure in China.
yeah, that's fine.
This is the Shanghai Tower. It's probably the tallest building now being built in China, and it will be over maybe in 1 or 2 years. And it's like maybe 650 meters tall. It's pretty stunning architectural feat. And this is the Three Gorges stand, quite controversial, but still very amazing to see. And this is a cross straight bridge connecting two sides of the land. Okay, I'm done.
All right. Stars, obviously, meant to inspire awe, to make the little individual feel small, and these in turn. Let's just push on with. We have Chicago downtown, which there we go. Okay, so this is familiar to most of you, I think, but this is the Chicago version. And my first reaction was, let's show these in contrast to the rest of the world, because this is pretty small stuff. That is, in Chicago, we think this is Chicago's, as the mayor said, this is Chicago's version of the Eiffel Tower, and it is, but it compared to what's going on in Seoul, even Paris and Beijing, this is small stuff. But nevertheless, Chicago has also been named by others at the National Endowment for the Arts as the most art and culture sensitive city of the United States. So we are the cutting edge city as a city in doing a wide range of culturally, aesthetically informed things in the last, really at the only, actively since I can date it very clearly to 1995, as I had in my class staff from City Hall, and in 1994, I asked, how much does the mayor listen to you? He said, oh yes, he's interested. The next year I asked, how much does the mayor listen to you? And they said, we mentioned 7 things and he does 12. So the mayor got on the bandwagon dramatically in 1995, and the city has been doing things of this sort. And heavily subsidizing concerts, which were started under Jane Byrne, 1980s, but they grew and grew and grew. So for 4 months every summer, we have Chicago Fest. And these are major in attracting people for a week or whatever longer, some of the summer, much of the summer. And then they come after they graduate from college or they think of other things, and they've stayed, making the 4-mile downtown area of Chicago, relative to its suburbs, the fastest growing downtown in the United States, more than Austin, Texas, than New York, than Seattle, than Berkeley, or whatever. This 4-mile downtown area is really booming, doubling. I mean, the near north side has doubled in population, even though the old steel mill areas have dramatically declined. So we've got huge global international differences in different neighborhoods of Chicago. So you can see these slides, but you can also find some of these kinds of cultural contrasts by biking around in Chicago. And with John Boyer and Mark Hansen, I've been doing over 15 years bicycle tours where we visit these neighborhoods, stop, and the three of us each talk about different cultural perspectives on what's happening in different neighborhoods. Okay. We'll have more on do-it-yourself, but I'll just mention one name, new, I think many of you know, but I'll just mention for the record. Jane Jacobs is the person who really made the DIY famous. That is, she attacked, or here's Theaster. We just got a picture of Theaster there. Okay, yeah, this is, okay, so this is the one that we just shared. Let's just show, sorry, let me say Theaster first. Let me say Jane Jacobs first, then we'll have a bit on Theaster. Jane Jacobs, when Manhattan was being discussed as the site, that is Greenwich Village neighborhood in lower Manhattan was being discussed as the site of tearing down thousands of homes and apartments in order to build a freeway that would go right across the middle of lower Manhattan. Jane Jacobs, living in Greenwich Village herself, mobilized and said, this is ridiculous. So she mobilized a confrontation, talks, lectures, parades, debates to say, stop the freeways. And the czar of New York City at the time, the freeway builder, was stopped in his tracks, and it did not happen. So she then went on. She wrote a famous book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and argued that creativity growing out of people in neighborhoods like Greenwich Village with a bohemian, different lifestyle is the driver of cities. And if you destroy those ways of thinking, that creative spark, you destroy the economy, the culture, the political leadership, and more. Okay, so this has now been picked up and has become the center of architecture and planning by what's called the urban, what's the name? Blocking on the term. But basically, there's a national center for it in Chicago, which deals with this kind of planning and architectural side. But the point is, and we'll cover more and as we'll review in a second, on the bottom up. But let's just show briefly Theaster Gates, who started. I mentioned he had no money. He built one house. After he built 2 or 3 houses, and people gave him some records and books, and he got some other things for a very, very low price. The word spread about him doing this, and there was an old bank which had been run down and empty for about 25 years just south of Hyde Park, and the city said, okay, we'll give you this old bank building for a low price, $1 or something, on condition that you raise, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and really make it nice. And he said, well, I'll do my best. Okay, here he is. Let's see what he says, if we can get him to talk to us. Okay, we're seeing, but can we get him to talk, or is that not working? Maybe not. Okay, basically he said this is the old art bank, and these were some things which he wanted to put into it. Yeah. Okay. He then took some. This is something he took to Europe and sold. But we're just seeing some shots of this art bank being converted into what he did. So here he is. Here it is now inside with the new paint, the new decoration, and new files for records. This came from a record shop in Hyde Park called Dr. Wax, and these were initially in a little house which he got in foreclosure. But instead of fixing up and selling or renting the house, he made the house and the records. He got a DJ, and he said anybody who wants to come can come. And he had another house of books, and he said anybody who wants to come and read here, come on over and read. And so these are now brought together in the art bank, as well as the past pictures. They contributed to him Ebony and these Jet magazines as cultural legacy of African Americans, especially. And here you can see, I'll get a shot. He's got huge. That's his link to the Parisian National Library. That we're now on the ground floor, but the stacks go up to the ceiling. Yeah, I think he's looking up to the ceiling, and you can see roughly 3 floors of stacks of books going up there. Okay, sorry we don't have his own words speaking to you, but you can find this and more. I just looked at some others again today. There are things he was in Time about 3 months ago, and there's more stuff about him all the time. Okay, why don't we quit on that section of Theaster, please? Do we have another video, Alan, in that series, or is that what we have?
Yeah, that's what we have. So if you want to show Theaster Gates, there is a TED Talk immediately down here.
No, stop.
Okay.
Sure. No more for now. I'm showing Theaster to illustrate the opposite of Louis XIV. Okay, now we're getting to interpretations and theory. And I'll just put in 1 or 2 words, as this is what we're going to elaborate in the whole course. The famous quote of Louis XIV when he was building he was building Versailles and these other things, these other Starchitectures, was superflu chose très nécessaire. The superfluous is a very necessary thing. Superfluous. This in turn, a century or so later, led Thorstein Veblen to coin, when he was here in the faculty, living on the Midway, conspicuous consumption, which was highly visible in America when the robber barons, so-called, the Fords, the Rockefellers, made their fortunes. They initially started building huge art palaces like those in Europe. And there was such a strong reaction against this by the press and the public that the income tax was created, and a sense of that we must control and not be taken over by these people. And that has been a tension continuing on ever since. A leading theory today is distinction, Pierre Bourdieu, and these kinds of things of how to interpret this. That is, how much are people doing this for non-aesthetic reasons? And if the goal is, as Shmuel Eisenstadt, distinguished Israeli sociologist, has published a book called The Political System of Empires, and he argued that Versailles was built to create the French nation and to build an empire around the world. And that empires have typically, I won't say typically, but in this case, this was an amazingly successful effort, because if you bring Catherine the Great there, you then bring the dukes from Germany, from the smaller, lower level French people. And I'll give you just one example. The father of Napoleon Bonaparte was a prefect of Corsica. And the name Bonaparte really was Italian, and he and his son, Napoleon Bonaparte, spoke French with a strong Italian accent. They nevertheless went to Versailles when Napoleon Bonaparte was a young boy to try, his father hoped, to show him how Louis XIV was doing it and how, or the other later Louis were doing it, so that he might be able to succeed even better than his father. So in that sense, they neglected Corsica. That was the goal of Versailles, that the cultural excitement, the buzz, would draw people away from their local groundings, their local roots, and permit the administration, the bureaucracy to come in and take over. And that happened in the case of France, more powerfully than any other major European country. And so we have, by contrast, say, a federalist system in Germany and a highly decentralized, locally based structure in Switzerland. Okay, so we have variations both within Europe and around the world, but I'm linking this to the theories and the interpretations which interface both with what's in people's heads and minds and hearts, and loudspeakers of what they think and thought in the case of Versailles, and what maybe is in the case of China or New York or the Louvre. That is, where and how to interpret the meaning of these is what we'll deal with in the course. We've got. I've got more things. Let me briefly mention my agenda, and then I want to pause for comments or questions for a bit before proceeding. I'm going to mention some other sort of resource bases that we'll be able to build on from the National Endowment for the Arts in the US, the cultural placemaking theories of the people who will feature mostly on Wednesday. I'll mention that a bit on Bronzeville and the city of Chicago, and then a brief overview of some sections of the course, and then maybe the book on scenescapes. But let me stop here for a minute. If anyone has any questions or quick comments you want to fold in, and see how if we can get hand raising and a little bit of discussion to work with Zoom, testing our tech side for a minute. Also, I'm trying not just to lecture.
Yeah, the raise hand button. Okay, we see Ziling Chen. You have a question?
Yes.
So
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
It works.
So my question will be like, then how do we consider this kind of destruction of the past scenescape as political or cultural moves towards this kind of agenda you're talking about? Should we consider those kind of the deconstruction of the past or the past scenescapes as part of it?
Excellent, very central question. I work with two students here at Chicago and another student who came here from Princeton as they were studying, in both cases, the Beijing Olympics and addressing the question you raised, because in order to create these fantastic buildings, and we didn't get all of them, but there are others called the Bird's Nest and so forth. There are 6, 7, 8 massive structures, not as big as the airport, but they were built by moving out, I think the number was something like 40,000 Beijing citizens. Those citizens were moved out, their buildings were destroyed completely, and these dramatic, huge new buildings were put in. Where did the buildings come from? The Chinese national government and the mayor of Beijing issued a request for proposals internationally, and they wanted world famous architecture, the best things, the dramatic things that they could find. And so they have Spanish, Italian, English, other architects in their work. Then what happened? the Chinese architects organized and said, you are destroying Chinese culture and architecture. You have no linkage to traditional Chinese aesthetic meaning. You're destroying these neighborhoods, you're driving the people out, and there's no attention to this. Do you have any sense of historic preservation, of how to join? And so one of the PhDs was mostly on the concept of historic preservation in China, in the West, in different locations and over time. The quick answer, I think it was the mayor of Beijing at the time, said, "Oh, you know, if we decide we want to have those places that we torn down rebuilt, we can easily rebuild them. We do that all the time." In a sense, that's not just a funny answer, because in cities like Rome or Beijing, they have been there for so long that this has happened many, many, many times. Whereas in America, with such a new, recent country with such a short history, the idea that we must have the original building exactly as it was, and if anybody changes anything, then that's wrong. So that these competing historical preservation conceptions, as well as ideas of people's culture, people's meaning, people's sense of neighborhood, these are things, some of which these are all feeding into what are current ongoing debates, which I've covered some of in the last two courses this year, urban policy and then global local politics, but we'll cover the more aesthetic elements of this, which I'm alluding to right now from these two PhDs, of saying, or I'll just mention one more international example to say I'm not just beating up on Beijing at all. That is that Starchitecture is everywhere. But the question is where and how to link it with other things. And that's why I'm pointing especially to I.M. Pai, Chinese himself, Chinese architect, going to probably one of the most treasured, that is, the Louvre was not just an art museum. The Louvre was the royal palace before they built Versailles, and it still remained the downtown palace under the kings. It was only after the revolution that it became an art museum. So in that sense, your question is central, and so people argue, debate, and so just one more quick example. The city of Berlin had a similar problem. After World War II, it was destroyed. That is, most of the whole city was destroyed by Allied bombing. And so they built quick, cheap, not very interesting housing that lasted maybe 30, 40 years. Then in the end of the 20th century, people in Berlin, architects, planners, said, what can we do that's more creative and interesting and will fit with Berlin being one of the centers of European culture and civilization? They fought so much and so long that they finally decided to rebuild Berlin with architecture that was approximately the most in style in about 1890. Okay, so I cite that to simply say there's no right or wrong answer, and architects, planners, aestheticians, and everybody in the street has opinions on these things in ways that continue from Black Lives Matter to ISIS to and clearly, I mean, ISIS, I mentioned deliberately, ISIS would clearly destroy certain of the icons, and this is, I mean, they didn't started doing this. This has been happening for centuries, as people have. Well, when Genghis Khan conquered, he destroyed the entire city of Berlin, of Beijing, the entire city of Moscow, and occupied. He had the largest ground built. He's the only person who integrated both China and Russia under one empire, and destroyed their capitals and destroyed both Baghdad, Tehran, Iraq, and Iran. And the populations of Iraq and Iran never returned to what they were pre-Genghis Khan until the 20th century. So these are issues which have been fought over for a long time, and there's an aesthetic cultural residue of this within. I've been reading a little bit about this, but Yeah, how about just 1 minute on this by Alan? Alan, why don't you just say, because you had a course, just mention what your course was, maybe 1 minute worth on the course.
So you mean Genghis Khan?
Yes, I mean, you showed me the PowerPoint
Okay.
from your
Yeah.
course. Don't try to show it. Just say in words. Or okay, if you got it there, fine. Okay. Let's not try to go through the whole thing, but just to give a flavor that there's a culture.
Yeah. So basically, this is a course about Islamic culture, but Mongol played a huge role in it, and in a way, Mongol, they believe in the so-called Tengrism, very close to animism. But as they expand their empire, they meet different religions, and later on, for two of the Khan, like Il Khan and another
1 minute, please, because we want to. I mean, this is great stuff, but I'm just trying to say he had this at the USC, but just to give them a flavor of how much is there and how important this is. We can't do the whole thing and change our whole course. But
so this course is about how Mongol Empire helped spread Islamic culture to a lot of places in the world. So the point I want to make was the religion they believe in was Tengrism, but as they expand the territory, they meet different cultures. They kill a lot of people, as you can see in all these dramatic pictures. They, in a way, help spread Islamic culture and Islamic religion as they split into 4 different smaller empire. They conquer different people, but they being in a way, disseminate cultures other than their original one. So this is the Mongolia. They used to worship the Soviet figure, but now they put Genghis Khan in the middle of the capital. So a lot of former Soviet countries changed their cultural narrative, putting all these people like Genghis Khan. In Uzbekistan, they use Timur Lenk, who was who claimed to be a descendant of Genghis Khan. So basically, this period, the Mongol period, played a huge role in the world civilization, and
Okay, very powerful. I mean, perhaps the most powerful example or powerful answer to your question stands right here. But this continues in different ways in discussions of white flight, gentrification, et cetera, et cetera. Black Lives Matter, ISIS, these issues are with us. One more question or comment from anyone? Okay, why don't I push on a little bit with other basics. Just a word on some of the resources we can draw on. The NEA is the National Endowment for the Arts. They issued a request for proposals maybe 5 years ago, and I responded to it with 2 former students, Dan Silver and James Murdoch, and we won. We've been advising the NEA on their evaluation methods and their whole research program. And including the largest project which they do, which is called Our Town. There may be 300 or so Our Town awards, financial awards. And it's an interesting mixture of it's a national government grant, which sounds like Starchitecture and might be if we were in Mongolia, but to try to link this with the federalist thinking of the US. Each project only grows out of a proposal initiated locally, and it must include a local artist, a local nonprofit, and a local government, like a city government or something like that. And so you've got these hundreds of these around the country doing very different things. They're not following one Louis XIV kind of policy. So then how to assess and incorporate these are things which we're now, and I'll just at this point say this is in progress. This is also includes every couple of years, the NEA has done a survey of all US citizens. And one of the major findings that was stressed by the reports which initially came out, which used what was called the benchmark items, 6 or so items of concerts, museums, traditional opera, classic high art, basically showed a decline in the number of people participating in these over the last 10, 20 years. And that these tended to be older people, and so the chairman of the board of NEA at the time said, maybe we should reduce our building programs and we shouldn't try to do so much if this is in decline. He said that in part tongue-in-cheek, but there was such a huge reaction that led to a review of how do we measure cultural participation, and so there were 4 reports, all presented here at the University of Chicago at the Cultural Policy Center. The authors of these came, we had discussions with them, and 3 of them I would say were really outrageous, or I wouldn't say outrageous. They continued the same past story. The 4th, done by one of our students from the Harris School, Jennifer, took a broader perspective. That is, instead of focusing on the benchmark, she said, what else have we asked about that hasn't been used? Gospel, jazz, hip hop. If we add them and we add other kinds of cultural activities which people are doing, she found instead of about a 25, 28% participation rate, she found a 70% participation rate by the average American population. 70% of Americans are not only listening, they're also doing art. They're singing themselves in their own churches. So if one broadens the vision of what is art and culture and how does it relate to the population, as is now happening increasingly, artists themselves are doing street art. Artists themselves are going and doing graffiti, or they're doing enhanced graffiti. There's a movement among artists that is critical around the world. They're covering the Ministry of Culture in Paris with Christmas tree ornaments and so forth, which light up, showing a deliberate effort by the ministry, even the Ministry of Culture, to feature both creativity and new art as well as patrimoine, the patrimony of the past. And so to deal with this is a continual challenging effort, but it illustrates the ways that the data, the modes of analysis are being transformed, especially at the University of Chicago and by people thinking about urban innovations. And looking then, I'll just mention we had a conference in Paris where Steve Sawyer and I then went over some of this stuff. The city of Paris issued an RFP. We won. We beat the French, and we worked with the city of Paris mayor's office for a couple of years and issued a report of about 100 pages, which is summarized on the syllabus. So we've got lots of Parisian material. I studied in Paris as well with Levi Strauss, and earlier in Germany with Adorno. So those European theory traditions link with the sort of the Chicago neighborhood tradition in some of the stuff that we have in the course here. Okay, next quick point. City of Chicago. I came here because, and many others, maybe some of you came here because the USC has been, and the city of Chicago have made this the leading research university and the leading city in the world. Max Weber came here from Germany to come to the World's Fair at the end of the 19th century. He said, this is a fantastic city because it's like a man with his skin cut off. You can see everything writhing inside. He had in mind things like later Al Capone. And so if you go to Beijing, you go to Paris, you go to most places in the world, they still think of us as Al Capone gangsters. And maybe we are. But I'm looking down from my apartment. I live in Bronzeville on the street called Cermak Avenue, which was where the headquarters of Al Capone were, Cermak and Michigan Avenue. They now are, and so then we are dealing with the McCormick Place Center now being converted to a hospital. And 2 nights ago, 2 huge hearts are put up and illuminated at night on the 2 leading hotels right next to the hospital. This is rebranding the culture of Cermak Avenue. But it's also thinking about death. So think of that, of linking the culture of death as well with the culture at least of risk or fear of death or fear of crime, and how these fit together. All right. I'm advising just a quick one on this. The alderman has a committee where we're working with her on Bronzeville, and the former Michael Reese site, which was torn down. The hospital was torn down to make an Olympic village, but the Olympics never came here. We lost. It was empty, and we're now going over the traditions and the culture of Bronzeville and how to link that with this site in ways that can be creative and compelling. So basically that's in progress, and we'll draw on it. However, if we update the image of Chicago, where and how did this really change? I'd say I mentioned Daley in 1995, but the biggest change in the political culture was the election of Harold Washington. And in 1983, there were 2 Irish Catholics, Jane Byrne and Richard Daley. They split the white Catholic vote. Harold Washington then ran, and he won with 33 1/3 and about 1 or 2 votes. So he revolutionized the political culture of Chicago. As soon as this was in progress, I called up Bill Grimshaw, who'd written the best stuff on Black politics in Chicago, and said, really, you've got to document this, Bill. Do something about it. He said, no, I'm too busy. We're still in the campaign at this point. This is only the primary. I called him back a month later and said, this is the most studied city in the world. You've got to, you're in the inside. You've got to continue this somehow. He said, I'll do it on one condition. I said, what's that? He said, I said, what's that? And he said, if you do it with me. So we did it together for maybe 20, 25 years. With his contacts, we interviewed all kinds of political leaders around Harold Washington, and then continued on with Daley. And this is continuing on up to present. With me, with him, with many students. We have two books in draft, and one out, and the like, which we'll draw on. So I'm mentioning then, learning from the past. If you've got a torn down site like Michael Reese, if you tear down parts of Beijing and you create a new image of these stars, this is all cultural placemaking. But how does the culture and the meaning of this inform what people do and why, and how can we make sense of this, either in the Versailles sense or in the very small, one person, one building at a time, Theaster Gates. Okay, so if that's the question, what are the ways that we try to answer this? Let me look briefly at some of the themes in Actually, I think I'm gonna. I think I'll even pass on that. That is, I'm lecturing too much. At least I want to try to get a little bit more input from you now at the beginning. You all can see the syllabus. Take a look at it. We're cleaning it up. We're still adding a couple of things, but you get the flavor of what's there. The Scenescapes book I can say a little bit more about, but let me pause and see if we have first any further comments, questions from those of you here. You can either type something or you can, what's best, raise your hand. And Alan has said, yeah. So Alan, just sort of remind us orally, how do you raise your hand?
Okay. So people click on manage participants or participants. Then you will see several options underneath. Yeah. Kevin Quick, is that it?
Good.
Okay, Kevin, you have a question. Could you turn on your mic and speak directly? Okay, no. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, hello. I just wondered, so are these lectures going to be recorded then and put on the internet like it said in the syllabus?
Yes.
Or what is the format going to be going forward? If you guys could elaborate on that, please.
Yes, these are all being recorded and will be posted. Alan will fill in more technical detail. I won't try to go through the detail now, but we'll send that out to everybody on Canvas. More than that?
That's great, thanks.
Okay, more questions? $69 of you are right here now, successfully connected, and others may be trying but haven't managed to get connected today in the first day. But we've still done awfully well if we got. The other thing is we're not having any technical difficulty, for which I thank Alan especially. Maybe we spent hours in the last couple of weeks getting this set up, but okay. I'll wait one more few seconds if anyone wants to raise a hand or raise another question. Jacob, is that your hand? Is that just something flashing in the background? Jacob Mooney, no.
I'm sorry, that's just my brother in the background.
Okay. Any comments or questions from you?
No, sir. Thank you.
Not now. Okay. Alan, what if we do a couple of pages from the Scenescapes book?
Okay.
And this will I'll just give you a couple of big points to give a flavor of the whole course, and this is our main book, as I mentioned, you can get it through the seminary bookstore. They can have it sent to you, I think, anywhere in the world, or in another way if you want. Start at maybe page 7.
We may have different page number, but you can just tell me which figure.
It's a figure 1.1.
Okay.
This is the main.
Is that
right,
yeah, figure
it.
1.1.
That's it. What this does is say what leads to the importance of the idea of a scene, and we've illustrated kinds of scenes very much already today, and we look here at these 3 factors on the left and government on the top. Government being much more important in China and France, less important in the U.S. or Switzerland, say. The simple economic factors are the rise of market individualism along with post-industrialization, generally higher income and affluence, although clearly whether or not there's less tension is an interesting point, and this coronavirus can can heighten the potential salience of, well, I won't elaborate on that. I'll simply point out where and how these kinds of factors may lead to more or less use of scenes. We'll have a session. Kiji, are you connected to us? Okay, can we just hear? Can you raise your hand if you are, just so Alan knows that you're there? I'm not sure if she's successfully connected.
I think Kiji is here, and I think Kiji, can you talk to us directly?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay,
Yeah.
there you are. Great. Okay. Now I just wanted to acknowledge your important role and say Kiji is a visiting professor from Beijing. She's been here for the year. She's been in the 2 last classes. She has known in person for you maybe tell us about the problems you've had briefly, but she will talk to us on Wednesday and make a presentation on scenes work that she's been involved with and by others in China. So we will use often through the course France, China, and Chicago as 3 important cases because they're very different to compare and understand better some of the big theoretical variations, which I'm illustrating in the figure. We'll have empirical variations illustrated by Kiji, who's been working actively, reports with the city of Beijing through this coronavirus crisis, etc. As well as she's a consultant with smaller towns and planner, and so she's a wonderful participant to have engaged and from whom we can all learn. So I'm just showing here the variations in these social factors. The slimmer family in the West is seen as an individual decision. One way to deal with overpopulation, if you bring in the government box, is to create a one-child policy, which is what the Chinese did. No one could have more than 1 child. So the Chinese are more creative and ambitious at massive policy changes that can change or respond to problems in ways that many in the West think too small, I would say. So let's scroll on down, as I'm mentioning, the slimmer family, education. But in general, the social factors often lead to more tolerance of individual and group variations. Let me add the third, and then I'll come back with counters to some of this. Cultural factors tend to lead over time, more education, more travel, more media access tend to lead to a rise of relativity, hermeneutics, pragmatism, modernism, the end of, I won't say end, but the decline of absolutes and a quest for Cartesian certainty and Newtonian mechanisms. This sort of sense of the Einsteinian physics idea of relativity in culture leads to the anthropological sense that we've got lots of variations from Genghis Khan to Muslim to Christian to Orthodox, etc. But these in turn, in the last, especially most visibly in the last 10 years, if you will, we've seen the rise of populist political leaders, which include the leaders of China and the US and England and France today. But by citing those, I'm pointing out, even though they all claim to be populist, they define the specifics in very different, interesting ways. And so we will trying to explicitly introduce some of the different political agendas from Louis XIV up to mayors and national leaders in the West and in China today. Okay, so these are our, but the simple point I'm making is an answer to the question we had a little earlier. How about conflict? How about people who disagree? And I'm citing that as many leaders who were elected in the style, let's say, of Bill Clinton and Tony Blair, this new socially liberal, tolerant leadership led in turn to a counter-reaction, which is Donald Trump. And so that aspect of Trump, of fighting against immigration, may have become it's something which I won't try to to restate the news, but these are clearly things which we are living through and we are theorizing at the same time. Okay, let's push on to page 12. Okay, is about the rise of the arts. The simple point here that the arts are dramatically increasing, faster than average. Just stop here for a second. Total job increase is about like this from, it's small from 1999 to 2008. But at the top, we find lots of art activities are growing. We find some decreases at the bottom of the more traditional arts activities. Just scroll down a little more. Down at the bottom, amusement arcades, Zooms, bowling, these are in decline relative to the more electronically based kinds of activities, but not just electronically based, although where and how Kiji will tell us more about. Let's go on to page 12. Or is it, no, on page, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, page 12. Okay, look at this. There were a couple of people talk about them as depression and business cycles. Look at 1939. Look at the computer crash. Look at the real estate drop. Leisure and hospitality, arts, entertainment, and recreation as a share of total employment, virtually unchanged by those. These are not the rise of the arts is not a cyclical phenomenon. It's a long-term growing pattern in the labor market, and it in turn builds on the kinds of things which Bob Fogel, in his book, dealt with the rise of leisure from the 19th century onward. Maybe we don't have as much leisure time as we'd like, but we got a lot more than they did in the 19th century when people would work 15, 18, 20 hours in factories. Okay, so as people have more leisure time, they spend more time in the arts. China is now explicitly converting itself from a production export economy to a domestic consumption-driven economy. And the arts and what Kiji will talk to us about is central to this transformation. Okay, page 25, please. Then I think I'll just show 25 and then we'll quit.
Is that figure 1.1?
Yeah, that's it. That's perfect. How about technology and economic development? The classic factors of economic development or income, jobs, human capital are clearly there. The source, one source is having more technology industry clusters. Silicon Valley ought to lead to more local economic development around Silicon Valley in Northern California. We don't disagree with that, and we measured this controlling for income, education, race, crime, a bunch of other things. Then we add measures of scenes, such as those which promote more self-expression or where people can get together, cafes where people can meet and talk from different companies. And we show that across the US, if you look at these tech clusters, if you just have a mall where everybody drives home after work and they don't talk, you don't have as much impact as if you have cafes, local restaurants, and a scene which promotes more sociability of the sort which Jane Jacobs wrote and talked about, that these in turn, and so the arrow with a circle around it says, and this is often the way that scenes work, there can be a direct effect, which is the straight arrow on the right, or there can be an enhancement, an interactive effect, where other things take on more power because they jointly operate with a type of scene dimension. Okay, that's our overview of the kinds of things which are in the Scenescapes book, which you can read on, and we will have more as we proceed. But we're at the end of our hour for today. Thank you for being so successful and joining with us, and we will send out information on how to access recordings for those of you who were not here in the first round. Cheers to all for making it work, especially Alan and Jimin, who didn't speak yet, but he will, and he's part of this as well. Kiji will be our star on Wednesday. Take a look at anything from her I'm not sure if we have anything yet on the syllabus, but she'll talk to us. and you get a flavor of how important China is in our course and in this whole set of activities. Thank you all. Talk to you Wednesday.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor.
you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sir,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
All right, lots of names. Great to see some faces too. All right, I'll flip this on to
Professor Clark,
yes.
I have a final question to ask, which is about your the other seminar course you offered on Tuesday. I know I've noticed it's consent required. Is it still open? So can I still send in emails to ask if I can join?
It's officially closed. That is this course here where we are now, Urban Innovation, is open. Maybe, I mean, if that is, we're fearful. We're trying to have, it's really run as a seminar, whereas this is not. We don't try to. That is, we'll have some discussion here, but we're not trying to have everybody. It's impossible to do that with 100 people. Whereas the other one, we're trying to keep very small. So I would say, if you're interested, send in an email to me and John Livy Martin, and we'll review it. But I don't know is the quick answer.
Yeah, because like I'm not really sure. The course description is also very vague. I don't know like which course to choose, and I'm also a master student. I know this course is a lecture open for both undergrad and graduate students. So for me personally, I might prefer to take seminar, but it's just the thing is I don't know what the course is really about.
I'd say let's talk individually. You and I can Skype or whatever, or Zoom privately. But I mean, my quick answer depends on your specific interests and topic area. That the topics covered are different. This is a more of an urban public policy, general theory course. The other is a seminar, which is more abstract theories alone, without the kind of context which we're stressing in this course. That's the quick, simple answer. Depending on your topic, the one or the other might be more appropriate if you're doing an MA, for instance.
Okay. Thank you. I will send in emails. Thank you.
Good. Anyone else, or we're signing off officially, but if anyone has a quick housekeeping question, go ahead. Okay.
Okay.
Kishi, are you still there? Or she's the last one. Maybe she's signing off too.
I think Kiji is still in the room.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. I'm just. That is the. Oh yeah. You're still there. Good. Yeah. Oh yeah. I forgot to announce that we have office hours right now after class. I should have said that. Forgot to. My mistake.
But it's on syllabus, so students
okay.
know that if they read them.
Okay. Kishi, I'm glad you're here. Any reactions or advice as your role, not just in presenting for 10 minutes on Wednesday, but your more general role? And the more we can engage you, I think the better the course will be. But do you have any reactions or thoughts on what you've heard and what you and how much you could help us?
It's okay. I think it's a good way to use Zoom to have conference.
Yeah, actually, let me stop for a second. We are recording, or at least I'm recording. Alan, should we stop this and start a new recording for us among the three of us?
Yeah. So we can. So Jimmy and I can start recording, but Terry, you can also start your cloud recording.
Okay.
So
recording paused.
Let me